Welcome back to the Spiritual Psychologist. I am super excited for today's episode. I am talking to Nicky Clinch. She is talking about her journey from addiction, drug addiction, bulimia, anorexia, to now living a very, very different life, running a 7-figure business with her family, her gorgeous family, living in New Zealand. So in today's episode, we have Nicky Clinch, who is a master maturation facilitator and teacher, workshop leader, Hay House author, and shamanic healer. She is the founder and leader of Alchemy of Being, which is an academy of maturation coaching, and she has now trained hundreds of people globally to become powerful maturation coaches. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you. I obviously have followed your work for a while, and when you see somebody who is, I guess, like holding space as a leader in the healing world, in the spiritual world, you kind of forget where somebody, or don't necessarily know where somebody has come from in terms of their own journey of following the spiritual path and healing. And I just think it's always helpful to go back to that, because everybody starts from a place of shadow, of a deep dark shadow, to get to this space of leading people in the same way that I do with my clients as well. You know, the reason that I can hold this space and lead this space in the way that I can is because I've navigated my own shadows and gone on a journey with that. So I'd just love to hear your journey, as much as you kind of want to share, as much as feels good for you.
Yes, I mean, I'm really happy to share because I don't think that there's anything more important than the human story. We can learn a lot from books, and information is always valuable, but there's nothing more powerful and empowering than the human story, because it's the one thing that bonds and connects us all together, is that we are all part of this species. And we are all born into this thing called life, and we have to somehow find a way to navigate it. So I'm very happy to share my story. The obvious kind of shadow parts, a lot of people have heard of. I've written about it in my book. I used to be a drug addict. I was heavily bulimic. I was an alcoholic. I would say I was addicted to anything that would allow me to escape. I was addicted to oblivion. But I want to go deeper now when I tell people the story, because that stuff was actually just me trying to solve the problem.
Yeah.
The drugs and the alcohol and the bulimia and the anorexia and the money issues. I was the girl that was kicked out of bars. I stole from my parents. I was told I wasn't going to live until I was 30. It was really bad. But that, surprisingly, people will find this surprising to hear, that stuff was me trying to solve the problem.
Yes.
When I got clean from all the substances and the bulimia and the destructive behaviors, it was only then that I really started to access what was the problem. And this is the part that I haven't shared as much of yet. When you put all the drama and the chaos and the destruction away, what's left is facing ourselves. And what was there for me was deep levels of worthlessness, codependency. I suffered extraordinary amounts of trauma in early childhood. My mother was mentally unwell. My father had left by the time I was 1. All sorts of kinds of trauma. And when I put away all the destruction and the stuff that created the drama, what I was left with was to discover that I had very, very little sense of myself.
Yes.
I searched and strived to get all my power from external areas of life. The men that would love me, the jobs that would validate me, how my stomach looked,
Yeah.
um, all these external factors that gave me, or falsely gave me, a sense of worth and value in the world. And it was only really then that the work for me really began, which sounds extraordinary, 10 years into getting clean.
It's layers though, isn't it? Like that's the perfect kind of example of like there's the surface level stuff that is already deep, already painful, right? Or it feels painful and it becomes the, I guess, in the external world, it becomes the obsession for other people as well. So if you were an addict, then for everybody else, that's the bit that's the concern, not
Yes,
the deeper, darker pain and suffering that is masked by the addiction. And
absolutely.
yeah, and the same for you probably at that time, I can relate to the disordered eating stuff, that it's like the obsession, the obsession of the external and the avoidance of the deeper sense of grief and loss and
Mm.
um yeah, lack of identity.
I mean, I teach this often, that actually, because people come to me a lot to try and break patterns and break cycles, these repetitive patterns and cycles that we keep finding ourselves in no matter what strategies we try to do. And the first thing I
Yeah.
say is your pattern that you're trying to solve is not the problem.
Yes.
Your pattern has been you trying to solve the problem. My bulimia was me trying to solve the problem of the deep longing that I had for mother nurturing.
Yeah.
My addiction, my alcoholism, and my drug addiction was me trying to solve the problem of feeling completely disconnected and alone in the world. When we put away the noise, that's when we have the intimate mirror of, wow, who even am I?
Yeah.
And what's my place in this world? And what's my relationship with this world? And that's where the work really begins. And for me, that was the case.
Where did you start with that? So once you kind of, I guess once you found a reasonable space of safety and foundation to cope without going towards really harmful, destructive kind of patterns of behavior. Once you found that safety, a sense of safety in
Mm.
yourself, not to go to those places, where did you go next? Because that's the first bit, isn't it? Is finding that foundation. You've got to get that foundation of safety rather than wanting to run away from yourself.
Yes, great question. And actually, it's a relatively simple answer, but we miss it because it's so simple. I guess because I hit rock bottom so young, and I really was at rock bottom. Like I genuinely was told by a doctor that I wouldn't live to the age of 30. Blood vessels had burst in my face. I was emaciated. I was on the verge of not having life anymore. And so when I changed my life, I was only 20. And the things that got me through those early phases are the same things that got me through always. Is one, I didn't do it alone. I
Yes.
always had support. I would have a therapist. At the beginning, it was a therapist. I would have a sponsor. This is at the early stages of getting clean. I would go to groups where I would be surrounded by community of people that would identify and I could identify with. And my relationship with God and Source became a priority for me.
I was just going to say, was the relationship with God early on as well, or did that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So when you first get clean, it's like one of the first things that you're invited to do is to deepen your relationship with something outside of yourself.
Mm.
So in those early years, that was my priority. Those were the aspects. My whole life revolved around these things: being in community of people that identified, having my own support,
Mm.
investing in my own support or getting help to invest in it, and deepening my relationship with source. Now, once all the drama or that kind of drama cleared, that was still the same thing. It's just it kept evolving. Right.
Yes.
What kind of support do I need now? I've never, in my 23 years of being on this journey, I've never seen getting support as a weakness.
No.
It has just been part of my, it's non-negotiable for me. I
Yes.
still have mentors and coaches
Mm.
that teach me today, as I did at the beginning. It's just the kind of support evolves and changes.
Yes.
I still surround myself with people in community where I can share and say the things inside my heart and my mind that I feel like I can't say out loud, but I
Mm.
have people around me that will listen and that will identify.
It's
And my relationship with Source, sorry, my
mm.
relationship with Source is still number one.
Mm.
So I think these are like the anchor points to
Yes.
being able to build self-trust, trust in life. And, you know, it's not about fixing our problems. It's about outgrowing the need to even have them.
Mm.
And we outgrow the need to even have them when we deepen the levels of trust and safety in ourselves and with life. And that's really what maturation is. We outgrow who we think we are, who we thought we were, in order to become who we're becoming. That's that we mature, we
Yes.
evolve.
Yeah. And it's like when you bring in also the trauma piece, it's that like when you have been used to chaos, you crave chaos because it feels safe. And it's
Yes.
it's evolving those patterns, isn't it? Of okay, I'm safe without the chaos. Like what does that feel like? And that's highly uncomfortable if you're used to it. And yeah,
Yeah.
evolving into yeah, evolving all of that. And I totally agree with what you're saying about mentorship and coaching and um having those safe spaces, because there's so much that, like, I know for me in the past, and definitely that's evolved over time, but there were so many, the majority of my life I just lived in secrecy. I lived in
Yes.
secrecy and shame, and it's so poisonous.
Yes.
It's so poisonous. And as you start to lean into that trust of safe relationships or safe community, whatever that looks like for you, you those layers of shame start to dissolve, and you realize I'm enough. I'm
Yes.
I can show up as me, and oh my gosh, I don't have to be anybody else.
Hmm. I mean, two really important things that you said, we, and this isn't just kind of woo woo language, this is ontological, this is scientific. We get our sense of identity, our sense of perception of who we are based on our early experiences of life, meaning our experiences of what it was like being in our world as a child is what gives us our identity in the world. And so if you are surrounded by chaos, drama, fighting, abandonment, disassociation, withholding, silent treatment, then that's not just a pattern, that becomes normal.
Mm.
That is literally what you recognize as what the world is.
Mm.
And so being able to break that, and this is what we do in our programs, being able to get to the root of that and shift how the world appears to you from that place, that is, it's like breaking an attachment to an identity. It's not
Mm.
just a pattern, it's the way we know ourselves. And so, yeah, it can feel threatening to outgrow something even though it seems destructive.
Mm.
And then the second thing, a big part of my work is about breaking the patterns, the mechanical survival patterns that define us and our identity, so that we can really live, thrive, and live. Now, in in family households, and this is not in just in some households, this is part of the way human beings are being human. In the family household, the way that the family keeps the family story in survival, there's kind of a family story. This is the way we are. This is
Yes.
the way we want the world to see us. The way that the family keeps the family story in survival is secrets.
Mm.
So when you open the door and the world sees you, you show there's like, this is the version we'll let you see. But when the doors close, the secrets that take place behind the doors, that's what keeps family and childhood dynamics stuck in
Mm.
survival, which is why we hold all these secrets. It's
Yes.
like we were taught we don't say these things when people are looking, when the doors are open. We won't even say it outside of ourselves. And so part of healing that deep childhood trauma and identity is to bring the secrets out, tell the truth.
Yes. When you navigate that space and you eventually reform a new identity that's ever evolving, but at the time you can't see anything else, and you go through that journey of I guess it again it is continuous, isn't it? But that journey of not knowing where your identity is going. But as you awaken, as you awaken and you see possibility, it's like, wow, I could be anyone. Do you know what I mean? I could, the potential of who I am in my
Mhm.
creativity, in what I could accomplish, in who I could support, in how I could live my life, all of those things become infinite
Yeah.
and expansive.
Yes. I mean, literally infinite. I mean, that's why I wrote my book is called Surrender. That's why I
Mm.
wrote it. And I called it Surrender because you cannot you cannot outgrow your past, your story, without simultaneously being plummeted into a complete unknown space.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Transformation requires us to let the old die
Mm.
in order to birth the new. The first chapter of my book is called The Beginning of the End,
Mm.
because everybody who ended up in front of me was coming to the end of
Yes.
something
Yeah.
in order to begin.
Mm.
And so, yeah, we have to be willing to, or at least courageously choose, even if it scares us, to step off a cliff and step into an unknown field. Because, it's not just that it feels infinite, life actually is
Yes.
infinite.
Mm.
We are just made up of cells, we're made up of molecules, we're made up of the same matter as the trees.
Mm.
There's nothing that distinguishes us from everything else in life except our mind and what we think. And so once we can start to live beyond those attachments of thought and conditioning and belief and story, then really life is infinite. And,
Mm.
the life I live today is, I mean, is beyond that
Yeah.
20-year-old girl that was on the floor. It's
It's
beyond what I ever
incredible.
imagined.
It's so inspirational, so incredible. I'd love to take like a slightly different direction, if that's okay, into I guess your growth, because there's been like this is the perfect point to talk about that, because like you said, the 20-year-old version of you compared to who you are today is just it's such an incredible evolution. And I'd love to know from a growth perspective, especially maybe from the growth in your business.
Mm.
um I'm only going by what I see externally, obviously, but the growth in your business, and having a family, how, because it's an ongoing, there's ongoing challenges, aren't there? Like you can overcome those darkest, deepest shadows, but the shadows still arise, and as you evolve, new things pop up, you know?
Always,
Yeah,
yes.
and I'd just love to know what have some of the challenges been with in terms of growing, I guess growing a business first of all, but then also growing a business with a young family.
Just to give some context for everybody listening, and this is only really important because it gives context, but we're now a seven-figure business.
Mhm.
We have trained now over 150 people in our alchemy of being who are now qualified maturation coaches. We have thousands of people that come through our space every year.
Mm.
And I have 8 employees. So, we really are a company now that is creating international growth and impact in the world. And I have a 4-year-old who
Yes.
breastfed till he was 3.5. And I have a 9-year-old daughter. So, that's the context of
Yes.
the whole bit here. Last year, I went to London and I sat with my whole team and I opened up the training with them, with telling them how I began. And I think it's important to share it here. I came out of my second training, my second school, to begin the process of being a healer,
Mm.
and a coach and a transformation coach. Um, and I had the same things that I have today. I was willing to take risks
Mm.
always. Um, I was always led by something of a deeper listening rather than what people told me I should do.
Yes.
Um, and by listening to that, I was willing to take risks and I was willing to fail. And
Mm.
at the beginning, I would literally go out and put up flyers out all over my local community for the first little course that I was teaching. I had 4 people come. I remember one time only 2 people signed up. And my husband said, I was like, oh, maybe I should cancel. And my husband was like, Nicky, those are 2 human beings. You
Mm.
go and you take care of them. And I was like, wow, you're so right. That is human life. My job is to
Mm.
show up and take care of them. And that is the same way I run the business today. I listen deeply to what I feel is the right next step. I'm willing to always take risks and to
Mm.
fail. And through the failing, I have learned extraordinary things.
Yes.
I have failed so much. I remember I was reading Richard Branson's biography like 12 years ago. And the best thing about that biography was when I read that he had had 21 failed businesses. You see, we
Wow.
only hear of his success.
Yes.
He failed with 21 businesses, but he still kept going.
That is resilience.
It's so important, the retreats where no one comes, the classes where one person books, the
Mm.
investments that you make that don't come out. Every time I've made a mistake, I have learned so much.
Mm.
And then, I have a lot of support. That's one of the things when I decided that I was going to become a seven-figure business, and it wasn't about money. I knew that if we became a seven-figure business, we would be reaching thousands, multiple thousands of
Mm.
people. And that's what I want. I want to be able to impact consciousness on the planet right now on a bigger scale. I knew that I would need a lot of support. So what kind of support does that look like? Okay, I need a business coach. I have my own spiritual teacher who trains me and I'm an apprentice. What kind of body work, healing do I need in my daily life?
Mm.
Do I need a housekeeper who will make me juice and stock up the fridge?
Yes.
I have resources and help, and I had to take the risk to invest in them. I remember the first time I hired someone, I was like, you mean I can hire someone to come and like make sure I have lunch when I've
Mm.
had meetings all morning? And I remember I hired her before I could afford it.
Mm.
I hired my business coach before I had enough money to be the one who could have that coach. And then within 4 weeks, our revenue tripled. And it's like I've been willing to live as the one I'm growing into and be the space to receive what's coming. We bought this house. I remember walking around this house saying to my coach, wow, I feel like a millionaire. And that was before we were even close to making 1 million. And that year we made 1 million. Like, it's like, who am I willing to stand as? What kind of field and frequency am I willing to embody before the 3D even comes into form?
It's hard because not everybody's going to agree with the risk. You
No.
know, when you have a partner, when you have a family, it's brave. It's brave, isn't it, to trust your intuition, your soul calling, to take those risks, especially when it's financial.
Yes, it is. And and it's important for everyone to hear that my husband disagreed with almost every choice that I made until around last year when he was like, wow, she's kind of doing something.
Yes, yes.
But up until then, it freaked him out every time.
Mm.
And I had to remind myself that not everybody had come to the point when they almost died when they were 20. You know, I had hit as low as it could get, and I made it through. And so for me, I have always had this different relationship with life and with God. I don't think being reckless is what I'm saying. If you're going to take the risk, then you have to be 100% committed to be the one living that life. I have always put the same amount of commitment into my growth of business as I did to healing my trauma. It's the same. And it is brave. It
It
is brave.
is.
We have extraordinary courage in us. We do. It's just that we haven't been taught that.
Especially, you know, for not everybody, for a lot of women, there's a lot of people pleasing. And so to take that risk when you have a partner and a family, it's out of the box for a lot of people, you
Yes.
know. And it's breaking that, it's breaking that, dismantling that traditional narrative, you know, around what we're allowed to do as women.
Yes. And as Asian women, you know,
Yes.
I'm the only woman in my family that works. I'm the only woman in my family that didn't marry a rich white man.
Mm,
Um, I'm the only woman in my family that's I've made more money now than my father did. And
mm,
that was a massive
yeah.
challenge to cross that threshold. It brought up so much shame in me. The levels of shame,
Mm,
um, embarrassment, worthlessness that I had to process just to keep breaking the box. You
yeah.
know, this isn't just like love and light. Like, the deep work it takes
Mm,
to allow yourself to receive meant that I had to keep clearing and feeling and facing the levels of shame. The generations of Thai women in my family that were just my great grandfather had concubines. Like
mm,
that's my history.
yeah. That's
So
wild.
it's wild. That's just like 3 generations
Mm.
ago.
It's so yeah, I mean that's incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm.
So, it does take deep work. And so I know that my path is not, it's not like what everyone is going through, but I guess what I want you to hear is that we do have it in us.
Yes.
We have the ability to heal deeply. And when we do, our potential is extraordinary.
Mm.
We were told and conditioned to live in a box. That box is an illusion.
Yes, it
And the
is.
courage isn't just about the risks to take. The courage is willing to question the perceived box that you think is real. It's
Mm.
not.
Mm. So powerful. I think like with growth, I just want to go back to something that you said that really resonated, which was about, Richard Branson and how he had 21 failed businesses. There is a perception, especially in the coaching industry, where we're actually in the spiritual entrepreneur space, where it can feel or look like people are just growing constantly in terms of numbers, in terms of signups for their programs, all of those things. And that's definitely not been my experience. It's been up and down, and like, 1 minute, 1 minute I've kind of launched a program and people are on it, and then I've launched it again and nobody's signed up, and
Yes.
then I'll do a workshop and there's loads of people, and then I'll do another workshop and there's not that many people on it. It's like another new layer, a new layer of like conditioning of believing that growth is just a straight line up, in the same
No.
way that healing is, and it's the lie.
Please don't believe most things that you see on Instagram. Don't
Mm,
believe it. Unless you can tell that someone is being authentic and sharing the truth. You know, and I don't say this, judgmentally, but, we have a lot of people come into our programs. I've mentored people that have books out that are perceived to be doing very well, but they're like falling apart in the chair opposite me.
yes.
The real human life is not an Instagram picture.
Yes.
It's not. For everyone to know, we just had a very successful launch for Listening to Life, but I had 4 failed launches last year leading up to it. We had an extraordinary retreat, but leading up to that, we were like, whoa, where is everybody? Are we just
Mm,
completely one thing that I have noticed just from doing a few cycles now of this is that every time I have evolved my business is an expression of me.
mm,
And every time I have gone through a big level of evolution and an old part of myself has died, my business will go through like a quiet phase.
mm.
It's almost like it's just paused. And I notice less people come, less money comes in until it's all integrated, this new
Yeah.
place that I stand, and then suddenly everything would just go whoosh.
Mm,
So remember that your business is not separate to you. It's not a thing.
mm.
It has its own heartbeat, its own consciousness, and it's expressed from you. You are the source. The strategies aren't the source. You
Yes.
are the source.
Yeah. And it's like just so divinely timed what you said then. So if you're in that space of like in between death and rebirth,
Mm-hmm.
there's got to be that period of catch up. So it's like the universe is collaborating with you to give you that space as
Yes,
opposed to working against you.
yes, and to trust the quiet.
Mm,
Okay, there are quiet phases. We will get what we need. It probably won't be what we want. And it's safe to be quiet. It's safe to
yes.
slow down. In fact, when I look at the quiet phases last year, oof, I was going through a massive identity crisis. I'm
Mm,
glad I didn't have like 1,000 people to take care of because I needed
yes.
time to integrate.
Mm,
Now I'm like, bring it. I'm so ready now because everything is rooted in.
yes.
It'll happen again.
Yeah.
We'll go through it again.
Mm.
I just trust it now.
Yeah. I love your authenticity around getting support as well, because, again, it's like a narrative that we can believe as women, as mothers, that, this person's doing it. How are they running a 7-figure business, and they've got 2 young children and they're managing to do it and I can't, and I'm a failure. And it's obviously come, like you said, with risk and believing fully that it's the right decision to get certain levels of support and so on. But you know, that sense that those relationships, community, a network of support across like all areas of your life is so important, isn't it, when you are, if you're wanting to grow and evolve.
I can't imagine doing it alone. You know, when I was 8 months pregnant with my son, Callum, my husband, who at the time was the main breadwinner in our family, he was so unhappy and he wanted to leave his industry of design. And he actually got made redundant. He didn't want to look for another work in design. He wanted to train in the area that he works in now. And I remember sitting having this conversation with him, and I said, well, I love my work. Why don't you step out and I'll step up? I was 8 months pregnant. And I
Mm.
remember consciously saying to myself, whatever perception we've been taught as women that we can't have babies and still be fully expressed in our expression in our work, I don't believe that.
Mm.
And so I literally was like, okay, so what do I need to do this? My husband would literally pass me the baby while I'd be in sessions. I'd latch the baby on, and then you just see this hand, and you'd pass the baby back. And then as Callum got to like 4 or 5 months, I was like, okay, maybe I can take the risk to hire someone to come to the house 3 times a week while I'm working. And it became step by step. And then
Yeah.
my clients grew and the support grew.
Mm.
And, you know, for everyone to hear, I have 3 coaches right now. I have one to
Mm.
teach me about money and business because I came in as a healer. I was never meant to be a CEO
Yes.
or an entrepreneur.
Mm.
I don't know anything.
We have to be everything. You have to be everything, right? You've got to be like a social media manager, like everything.
Exactly. Oh my God, I've had to sit and like, I've had to hire people who know more than me in that area. You know, I literally be sitting there
Yes.
going, what strategy? What's CRM? What's this? What's that? And be willing to not know and to learn. Um, you know, I think, remember that we were meant to do this as a village. We were never meant to do it alone.
No.
It's just that society and the way that we live now, it has become so insular.
Mm.
So, you know, we're meant to have support. I'm the breadwinner. My husband has started working for my company now, but he still helps a lot with the kids. We have someone in the house to help with the house.
Mm.
Um, but I also have a team now that I've hired people who are better at me at marketing and
Yes.
copywriting and stuff that so I can do my job. Don't think that getting help is a weakness. And if you can't afford all the stuff that I'm talking about, when I first got my very first assistant, I was getting a lot of people who were interested in my work, and I couldn't do it alone. If I
Mm.
didn't get this assistant, I wouldn't have grown.
Yes.
But I couldn't afford the assistant. So I was like, what do I do? So
Mm.
I literally said to the universe, bring me someone who can help me grow and who wants to learn. Literally within 2 weeks, someone
Mm.
walked in my door. She just wanted me to teach her and to train her.
Mhm.
And I paid her £200 a month, bless her. She barely got any salary, but she helped me while I trained her.
Yeah.
And now she's an amazing facilitator. I mentored her the whole way through, and she assisted me as my
Mm.
business grew. So there are always ways.
Yeah. I know you said before as well about the shadows that come up when with receiving. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more if that's okay, because it's, yeah, I guess it's the how do you grow ability? Well, we have access to it, right? It's just that we don't necessarily know how to access
Mm.
receiving more of what it is that we may want. What does that journey look like for you?
Well, my journey is not the pretty, shiny love and light journey that you may have seen in manifesting areas. That's not my journey. For me, each time that I have expanded to receive more, I have had to heal something deeply that was memory that was frozen in my body, in my nervous system. I have had to feel and release it so that my body and my energy field expands. So to give you an example, in 2021, as my revenue was starting to grow and I kept hitting a plateau and I wanted to take it further. That was it. I wanted to start making, 6-figure months. Again, not just because it's not because of the money, it's because of the impact.
Yes.
And I literally couldn't. I was just in fear all the time. Um, so much anxiety that was in my body around being bigger, being seen, being safe, being seen, shame that would come up. And I had to face how much was unresolved around my relationship with my father. There was a lot of trauma there. And then so I had to then do that work. I
Mm.
didn't speak to him all year. I had to deal with how much rage I was still carrying
Mhm.
towards the trauma from him. And I had to be responsible for that. And
Yes.
as I released and healed that simultaneously, things
Mm.
started to grow. And it wasn't from anything hard or tough or doing, it actually became more effortless.
Yes.
It was
See,
like I could rest and soften, which allowed me to receive more.
and did you identify, like, did you know at the time, could you recognize that like the father wound stuff that was coming up was the thing that was creating that block?
Yeah, so in my experience, and I do say this to everyone I work with, you know, people like myself and other teachers and facilitators, we're just the assistant teachers.
Mm.
The master teacher is life.
Mm.
Life
Love
will
that.
always be your master teacher if you're willing to be in that kind of relationship with it. So, how it triggered off for me, and this is how life has always been with me. I remember at the beginning of last year, I was singing along and doing my work and trying to grow, and I was hitting this plateau, and then boom, something happened. I won't go into the details here, but something happened between me and my business coach, and it triggered me so much. The kind of reaction that I had to what happened with my business coach was so extraordinary that I was like, wow, where did that rage come from?
Mm.
And actually, it ended our relationship and forced me to look at what the hell just got triggered.
Mm.
Then I went into it with my teacher on a maturation perspective. And this is the work we do with people. I
Mm.
went into the pain and the trigger, and it brought me right back to a trauma that I had completely not had any awareness of around betrayal, around
Mm.
being in the holding of someone who I trust and betrayal. And that was what led me to
Mm.
all this father stuff that I hadn't even touched on yet.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was the beginning. And then I had to be responsible for that. And it took months of releasing rage and feeling the pain and aiming towards forgiveness towards him
Mm.
and myself. And then when I came out the other side, me and my business coach very beautifully got back in touch, and we got back together.
Mm.
and and I started noticing a big shift in my business. So I'm not like these are the manifestation tools. I'm like you are the source of what's coming in your life.
Yes.
Shift yourself
Mm.
and your reality will shift.
And the triggers part is so is the best teacher, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
I think like for a lot of people, including myself, you don't always know what the block is. You know, it's difficult to know, okay, there's some kind of a block here, but like how do I identify what it is that's preventing something from you from accessing something, that you're desiring?
Yes. Because we can't see where we're seeing from. We can only see what we're looking at. And this is the work we do in maturation. Our past is frozen in both the body and the mind.
Mm.
And it is giving us how we see reality. It's not just stuff that's happening. It is just normalized as how we see, which is why I couldn't see this blind spot,
Yes.
even after 23 years.
Mm.
When the blind spot uncovered, and how did I get to the root of that trigger? I was brought back into what the experiences that was reactivated, which is frozen in the body. The experiences of our childhood are frozen in the body.
Mm.
And the story and the perception of that memory is entangled and frozen in the mind.
Mm.
And so we have to work on a body mind level,
Yes.
being able to help someone go back into where the past is frozen in the body mind, coloring how you see and who you're being. It's a blind spot.
Yeah.
You can't see it yourself. We can't turn around going, what's there?
Mm.
We can only see what's coming up and use that. You'll need help
Yeah.
because you need another set of eyes to go into what is from the past that is giving us our present.
This whole conversation has it just comes back to healing, healing layers that we didn't know about, healing parts of ourselves that we didn't know were stuck or frozen or whatever it is. You can do all of that initial, I guess, foundation building, and then it's is kind of revisiting, isn't it, or peeling back further layers, I would say, from what you're
Yes.
sharing. Yeah.
I mean, I just invite people to let go of this need to try and fix problems
Yeah.
and actually start b being willing to be in a relationship with life that is about growth and evolution.
Yeah, and joy, and
It's,
joy.
of course, it's
Yeah.
like, don't just focus on trying to fix the next thing.
Yes.
What I'm sharing with you is about a relationship I have with life.
Mm.
It's a deep and rich and beautiful relationship with life, which I hope I never stop growing.
Yeah.
I hope I never stop evolving, because
Mm.
every time I do, wow, I get to experience a depth of life that I didn't even know I could before.
Mm.
And so, it I think we are at a time on this planet right now where we're being invited to shift that relationship that we have with life from just trying to fix the next thing to, no, this is like a never-ending path of beautiful growth,
Mm.
which just keeps deepening and deepening and deepening. And after a while, you realize simple things like suddenly you notice how beautiful the tree is that
Yes.
you never really saw before.
Mm.
Or you look at your son and suddenly you're experiencing them in such a way that you never had before.
Yes.
These are the
Yes.
gifts of life, not the stuff.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I resonate so deeply with that. Yeah, definitely. I had that experience earlier on today, actually, where my son was doing something. He was playing with something, and I was looking at his hands, and
Mm.
I was like, his hands are so cute. But I was
Yeah.
looking at all the details on his hands, like the little, I don't know, dirt marks and pen marks, and just the different coloring of different parts of his hand, And I was like, what, that's an experience. That's what we're
Yeah.
here for, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I tell a story in my book just to share it. It's so beautiful. My little boy was 2 at the time, and he was just starting to walk. And we went for a walk to the park. And he was stopping to look and touch everything, and I was getting really, irritated. I'm like, oh God, we're going to take forever to get to the park. And then I stopped and I was like, oh, I don't look at the stones because I already know stones, or I don't look at the bush because, oh, I already know bush. So I stopped and I looked at a flower as if I had never seen a flower before, just the way he was looking at it.
Yes.
And my God, I saw such beauty in that flower. And it gave me an experience of magic. And
Mm.
we live in our life led by knowing, oh, we already know this and we know that. But when we're willing to slow down enough and not know, it's like, well, actually, maybe we don't know. It allows us to look deeper, to look at our children as if it's the first time, to look at each other as if it's the first time. And that's where the magic is.
And that's the bit that I think is so important, that you don't lose presence from wanting growth, because that's the bit that can happen where you're
Yeah.
just constantly in a cycle of seeking, and you're missing the now, you're missing, the flower, you're missing your child doing something or whatever it
Yes.
is, and then the next minute you turn around and like their face has changed. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
I mean, it's
yeah.
one of the hardest things that we struggle with in our business, because
Yes.
people ask us all the time, what are the results from doing this work?
Mm.
Presence is the result.
Yes.
Presence? What
Yeah.
about making
You
it
can't
happen?
quantify that.
When you have presence, well, then you can be in a different relationship with your life, and
Mm.
maybe intimacy can become available. Maybe abundance can become available. People miss presence because they're looking so much for the stuff.
Yeah.
But presence is everything. That's the root.
I have just absolutely adored our conversation. So powerful. Your journey and story is so inspirational, and yeah, I feel like this conversation has opened me up to so much more possibility, and I'm always in possibility. So thank you so much for taking the time to share just such beautiful wisdom and inspiration. And I'm just, yeah, looking forward to seeing more of you on your constant beautiful evolution and growth, and seeing your family as well.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been so wonderful to have this conversation. And thank you, everybody who's listening.